What if I told you that in the year 1347, during the darkest days of the Black Death, a king who had renounced God received a visitor from the stars? What if this encounter revealed truths about the divine that would challenge everything we think we know about faith, miracles, and the very nature of heaven itself? This is not history. This is legend, a tale whispered through forbidden manuscripts, passed down by secret keepers who dared to preserve what the church would have burned. A story that asks the ultimate question: what if the divine truth is far stranger and more beautiful than any earthly institution could contain? Today, I'm going to share with you the legend of Aldrich the Faithless and the celestial wanderer who changed his soul forever. This is a tale that will chill your spirit and ignite your imagination. A medieval myth that speaks to the deepest mysteries of existence. But before we begin this journey into the unknown, if you're ready to explore the hidden corners of legend and myth, to question what you've been taught and wonder about what lies beyond, then subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because we're about to dive into a story that has been kept secret for over 600 years. The year was 1347. The Black Death ravaged Europe like the breath of demons, and faith wavered in the hearts of men. In the remote kingdom of Valdres, nestled between the mist-shrouded peaks of what we now call the Carpathian Mountains, ruled a king unlike any other. King Aldrich had once been known as the Pious, a ruler who built great cathedrals and led his people in prayer. But when the plague took his beloved queen, his 3 young children, and half his kingdom, something died within him that no resurrection could restore. Aldrich cast aside his crown of gold and donned one of iron. He banned priests from his castle, burned holy relics in the courtyard, and declared to his terrified subjects, "If God exists, he is either powerless or cruel. I will serve neither." His court whispered that he had made a pact with darkness itself, trading his soul for earthly power. But the truth, as we shall see, was far more mysterious.
King Aldrich the Faithless sat upon his throne of black stone, a man of 40 winters whose eyes held the cold emptiness of a winter sky. Once golden-haired and quick to laughter, he now wore his dark hair long and unkempt, his beard streaked with premature silver. The great hall of Valdres Castle, once filled with the sound of harps and holy songs, now echoed only with the footsteps of his remaining servants and the whispered fears of his people. His inner struggle was not one of doubt. Doubt implies the possibility of belief. Aldrich had moved beyond doubt into a realm of bitter certainty. He had prayed, begged, sacrificed, and offered his very life to save his family from the plague. In return, he had received only silence from heaven and death from earth. If this was God's love, then Aldrich wanted no part of it. Each night he would climb to the highest tower of his castle, not to pray, but to rage at the stars. "Show me," he would shout into the darkness. "Show me one sign that you exist, that you care, that any of this suffering has meaning." But the stars remained cold and distant, offering no comfort, no answers. On the night of November 15th, 1347, the feast of Saint Albert the Great, Though Aldrich no longer acknowledged such things, something answered his call. The king stood alone in his tower chamber, a circular room lined with astronomical instruments he had collected from traveling scholars. These devices had once been tools for understanding God's creation. Now they were merely instruments for measuring the indifferent cosmos. As he studied a celestial map, calculating the movements of planets that seemed as cold and purposeless as his own existence, the night sky suddenly erupted in brilliance. A star fell from the heavens, but this was no ordinary meteor. It moved with deliberate purpose, slowing as it approached the earth, its light shifting from white to gold to the deep blue of twilight. The star fell upon the castle's east tower with a sound like distant thunder, but instead of destruction, there was only a gentle luminescence that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of a great heart. The guards of the king fled in terror, crossing themselves and crying out about divine judgment. But the faithless king felt only curiosity where others felt fear. He had asked for a sign, and something had answered. Whether it was God, demon, or mere chance, he would meet it face to face. With only a torch and his iron-crowned resolve, King Aldrich descended into the damaged tower. The stone walls glowed with residual starlight, and the air hummed with an energy that made his skin tingle. At the center of the destruction, where he expected to find crater and rubble, stood something that defied all understanding.
The being was neither fully solid nor purely light, but something between the two. A figure of crystalline radiance that seemed to be slowly solidifying into a more familiar form. It appeared humanoid but elongated, perhaps 7 feet in height, with features that suggested both great age and timeless youth. Its skin, if it could be called skin, was translucent and seemed to contain moving constellations. Most striking of all were its eyes, vast, deep, and filled with a compassion so profound that Aldrich felt his hardened heart skip a beat. The being was clearly wounded or weakened. Its luminescence flickered like a candle in wind, and parts of its form seemed to be dispersing into motes of light that drifted toward the ceiling. It sat, or perhaps floated, near where the tower's wall had been breached, and when it became aware of Aldrich's presence, it turned those cosmic eyes toward him. Communication came not through words, but something far more direct, a voice that spoke directly to his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. The voice was neither male nor female, but carried undertones of vast distances and ancient wisdom. "Fear not, Aldrich of Valdris. I am neither angel nor demon, as your kind understands such things. I am a wanderer between stars, a seeker of truth across the infinite cosmos. My vessel has been damaged by the barriers between worlds, and I find myself in need of sanctuary." Aldrich, who had faced charging armies without flinching, found his voice caught in his throat. He finally managed to speak. "What are you?" "I am what your prophets glimpsed in visions but could not name. I am what your philosophers theorized but could not prove. I am a servant of the one consciousness that flows through all things, the force your people call God, though that word captures but a fragment of the infinite truth. The king's hand went instinctively to where his sword should hang, but he had long ago ceased wearing weapons in his own castle. You speak of God. I have no use for such lies. The being's form pulsed with what might have been sadness. Your pain speaks louder than your words, crowned one. I sense the grief that has closed your heart like winter ice. But if you will grant me shelter until my strength returns, I will share with you truths that your world's holy men have forgotten. Truths about the one you call Jesus, about the realm you name heaven, about the nature of the divine love that you believe has abandoned you. For a long moment, King and Star Wanderer regarded each other in silence. Aldrich felt the weight of his own despair, but also something he had thought long dead: curiosity. What did this impossible being know? What could it reveal? And if it spoke falsely, what did he have left to lose? The church would call you demon. My people would flee in terror if they saw you. Truth has always frightened those who prefer comfortable lies, the being replied. But you have already chosen to walk apart from your people's beliefs. You have nothing left to lose by listening, and perhaps everything to gain.
Against every instinct of caution, against the warnings of a lifetime of teaching about false prophets and demonic deception, King Aldrich made his choice. I will give you sanctuary, being of light, but in return you will answer my questions, all of them. I want to know everything. The cosmic visitor's form brightened slightly, as if fed by the king's decision. Then prepare yourself, Aldrich the Faithless, for truths that will remake your understanding of existence itself. In the hidden chambers beneath Valdris Castle, chambers that had once been dungeons but now served as the king's private retreat from the world above, Aldrich sheltered his impossible guest. He told his remaining servants that the falling star contained nothing but celestial stone, and that the tower would be repaired in due time. Only Aldrich knew that in the deepest chamber, behind walls 3 feet thick, a being of starlight slowly regained its strength and prepared to share secrets that would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew. The being, who said it had no name as humans understand names, but could be called luminous for the sake of communication, began its revelations on the 3rd night of its stay. Sit, faithless king, and I will tell you of the one you call Jesus, and why his true message was both grander and simpler than your churches have taught. Aldrich settled onto a simple wooden chair, feeling more like a student than a monarch. I have heard enough about Jesus from priests and bishops. Their promises proved hollow when my family died in agony. That is because they taught you of a distant God who demands worship, when Jesus spoke of a present divinity that seeks only love. The man you call Jesus was indeed touched by the divine, but not as your theologians describe. He was not sent to appease an angry deity through sacrifice. He came to awaken humanity to the truth that the divine consciousness flows through every living being. The being's form pulsed with gentle light as it continued. The miracles attributed to Jesus were not violations of natural law, but demonstrations of what becomes possible when one aligns perfectly with the frequency of divine love. Love is not merely an emotion, Aldrich. It is the creative force that shapes reality itself. Then why, Aldrich's voice broke with old pain, why did love not save my wife, my children? Why do the innocent suffer while the cruel prosper?
Because your world has forgotten the greater truth, Jesus taught that the kingdom of heaven is not a distant reward for the dead, but a higher dimension of consciousness available to the living. He said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you, not within your hearts metaphorically, but literally within your capacity to perceive reality as it truly is." Luminos moved closer, its stellar radiance washing over the king like warm starlight. Death is not the end of existence, but a transition between forms of consciousness. Your beloved wife and children did not cease to exist. They moved beyond the limitations of physical form into a realm where love is the only reality. Their suffering has ended, but their love for you continues, unbound by the constraints of flesh. But if this is true, why don't all people know it? Why do the churches teach of wrath and judgment instead of love and awakening? Because institutions, even those founded on truth, tend to accumulate power by making people feel small and dependent. It is easier to control those who believe themselves sinful and separate from God than those who know themselves to be expressions of divine consciousness. Jesus never intended to found a religion. He came to awaken individuals to their own divine nature. The being's next words seemed to resonate in Aldrich's very bones. The God you have rejected is indeed false, the angry tyrant invented by men who feared their own power. The true divine nature is not a distant ruler, but the living fabric of consciousness itself, the love that holds every atom together, the intelligence that guides every star in its course. You have not lost your faith, Aldrich. You have simply outgrown a God too small to contain the truth of what you really are. For the first time in years, tears came to the king's eyes. But how can I know this isn't just beautiful deception? How can I trust what you say when I trusted before and was betrayed? A fair question, Luminos replied. Words alone cannot convey such truths. Allow me to show you. As the days passed, Aldrich found himself caught in wonder and terror. The being's words resonated with something deep in his soul, something that had been crying out in anguish since his family's death. But a lifetime of religious conditioning warred against these new revelations.
Each night, after his conversations with Luminos, the king would pace his chambers like a caged wolf. "Am I going mad?" he would ask the empty air. "Have I finally broken under the weight of grief and begun hallucinating divine visitors?" He would study his reflection in the polished metal of his mirror, searching for signs of the madness that might explain his extraordinary guest. Worse than the fear of insanity was the fear of hellfire. Though he had rejected the church's teachings, the specter of hellfire still haunted his dreams. What if Luminous was indeed a demon, sent to seduce him with beautiful lies? What if the very fact that these revelations felt so right, so healing, was proof of their diabolic origin?
He remembered the words of Bishop Mordecai, who had once been his spiritual advisor. The devil's greatest trick is to appear as an angel of light, offering truths that appeal to human pride rather than demanding humility before God. Was his willingness to believe that he possessed divine nature itself merely the ultimate expression of human arrogance? On the 7th night of Luminos's stay, these fears overwhelmed the king. He burst into the chamber where the being rested, his face wild with anguish. "Enough!" he shouted. "I cannot bear this uncertainty any longer. Are you demon or angel? Are your words truth or deception? I have spent years raging at God for his silence, and now when something finally answers, I cannot trust what I hear." The being regarded him with those vast, compassionate eyes, its stellar form flickering as if sensing his distress. "Your doubt honors you, Aldrich. Only a mind capable of truth would question what it desperately wants to believe. Then give me proof, not words, not visions, but something undeniable. Show me that what you say about love being the creative force of the universe is more than pretty philosophy." Luminos was quiet for a long moment, its light dimming as if in deep thought. When it spoke again, its mental voice carried a weight of solemn decision. "Such proof can be given, but it will change you irrevocably. Once you have seen divine love in action, once you have witnessed the true nature of reality, you cannot return to the comfortable despair you have worn like armor. Are you certain this is what you want?" Aldrich thought of his wife's face as she died, calling out to a God who did not answer. He thought of his children taken before they had truly lived. He thought of the years of rage and emptiness that had followed. What did he have to lose? "I am certain. Show me truth, whatever the cost." What happened next would be burned into Aldrich's memory for the rest of his days, a moment so profound that it split his life into before and after, darkness and light, despair and hope. Luminos rose from its resting place, its form growing brighter and more solid than Aldrich had ever seen it. The being extended what might have been a hand, though it seemed composed of condensed starlight, and spoke words that bypassed the king's ears and resonated directly in his soul. "Behold the truth of divine love, Aldrich of Valdris. See what your eyes have forgotten how to perceive." The chamber around them began to dissolve, not physically, but perceptually, as if reality itself was revealing hidden layers. The stone walls became transparent, and through them Aldrich could see not just the castle above, but far beyond, to his kingdom, to the world, to the cosmos itself. But this was not the cold, mechanical universe he had come to know through his astronomical studies. This was a cosmos alive with consciousness, every particle connected to every other by threads of luminous love. He could see the life force flowing through trees, through animals, through the very stones of his castle. Nothing was separate. Everything was part of an infinite web of being. "Now," Luminous said, "witness what you call miracle." The being's light intensified, and Aldrich felt something shift in the fabric of reality itself. In his mind's eye, he saw his wife Elena not as she had been in her final agonizing moments, but radiant and whole, surrounded by the same stellar luminescence that emanated from Luminous. She spoke, and though her voice came from beyond the physical world, it was unmistakably her. "My beloved Aldrich, I never left you. Death could not separate us. Only your grief blinded you to my presence. I am not gone. I am transformed. The love we shared was not destroyed by my dying. It was released from the limitations of flesh to become part of the eternal love that binds all things." Beside her, Aldrich saw his children, his son Marcus, his daughters Ilara and Sophia, all glowing with the same divine radiance, their faces filled not with the pain of their final earthly moments, but with joy and perfect peace. Marcus, who had died at only 12 years old, stepped forward with the wisdom of ages in his young features. "Father, we tried so hard to reach you through your grief, but you had closed your heart to anything but pain. We are not lost, we are free, and someday, when your earthly purpose is complete, you will join us in this realm where love is the only reality." The vision continued as Luminous showed Aldrich the true nature of the kingdom of heaven, not a distant paradise reserved for the dead, but a dimension of consciousness that interpenetrated the physical world. He saw how Jesus had tried to teach this truth, how the man of Nazareth had demonstrated that the divine nature was not separate from humanity, but the very essence of what human beings could become. But the most shattering revelation was yet to come. Luminous turned its cosmic gaze upon Aldrich himself, and the king saw his own being as if from the outside. He expected to see corruption, emptiness, the hollow shell he had believed himself to be. Instead, he saw light.
Despite his years of rage and rejection, despite his cursing of God and denial of faith, there burned within his chest a flame of divine consciousness that no earthly suffering could extinguish. This light was not diminished by his doubt. If anything, his honest questioning and refusal to accept easy answers had kept it purer than the faith of those who merely repeated what they were told. "Do you understand now?" Luminous asked. "The God you rejected was an idol made by human fear. The true divine nature has been within you all along, burning bright even in your darkest despair. Your love for your family, your rage at injustice, your refusal to accept meaningless suffering, these were expressions of the divine love that flows through you, not evidence of your separation from it." As the vision faded and the chamber walls became solid once more,
Aldrich found himself on his knees, tears streaming down his face. But these were not tears of grief. These were tears of overwhelming relief, of homecoming, of love so vast that it encompassed even his pain and transformed it into something beautiful. The being's form flickered, the effort of the demonstration having drained much of its remaining energy, but its mental voice was warm with satisfaction. Now you know. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? In the weeks that followed, those who knew King Aldrich witnessed a transformation that seemed nothing short of miraculous. The man who had been known as the Faithless began to demonstrate a kind of faith deeper than any religious observance, a faith in the fundamental goodness of existence itself. But this was not a return to his former piety. Aldrich did not rebuild the churches he had destroyed or recall the priests he had banished. Instead, he began to rule with a wisdom and compassion that seemed to flow from some inexhaustible inner source. When plague-stricken refugees arrived at his borders, he opened his castle to them personally, tending their wounds without fear of infection. When disputes arose between his subjects, he mediated with an insight that seemed to penetrate to the heart of every conflict, finding solutions that honored the dignity of all involved. Most remarkably, he began to speak of death differently. When families came to him grieving their losses to plague or war, he offered comfort that was neither false hope nor empty platitudes. He spoke of love as a force that transcends physical boundaries, of consciousness as something greater than the brain that houses it, of the divine spark that burns in every human being, regardless of their beliefs or station in life.
Luminos remained with the king for 40 days and 40 nights, a detail that would later inspire numerous legends and theological debates. During this time, the being's strength slowly returned, its stellar form growing brighter and more stable. But as its power returned, so did its need to continue its cosmic wandering. On the final night, as they sat in the chamber that had become their sanctuary of revelation, Luminos spoke of its departure. "My time in your world draws to a close, Aldrich. My vessel is healed, and the currents between worlds call me onward. But before I go, know this: what you have learned is not for you alone." "I know," Aldrich replied, "but how can I share such truths? Who would believe a king who claims to have hosted a being from the stars? And even if they believed, how can words convey what can only be experienced?" "Not through proclamation or preaching," Luminos answered. "Truth spreads through example, through love in action, through the quiet demonstration of divine nature in everyday life. You will never need to speak of our encounter, Aldrich. Those ready to hear truth will recognize it in how you live, how you rule, how you treat the least of your subjects. And in time, some will ask the source of your wisdom. To them you may speak more directly." The being's form began to shift, becoming less solid and more luminous, preparing for its return to the stellar realm. Remember, the divine spark that burns within you burns within all others as well. Some may have forgotten it, Some may have buried it beneath layers of pain or false teaching, but it can never be extinguished. Your purpose now is to help others remember their own light. As dawn approached on the 41st day, Luminos prepared to depart. The castle's highest tower was bathed in golden light as the being's form dissolved back into pure energy, preparing to rejoin the cosmic currents that flowed between the stars. Farewell, Aldrich, who was faithless but now sees truth. May your remaining years be filled with the joy of service to the divine love that binds all things. "Wait," Aldrich called out as the light began to rise. "Will I see my family again? Will I join them in that realm of perfect love?" The being's mental voice came one last time, warm with absolute certainty. "Love never dies, dear king. What begins in eternity returns to eternity. Your family waits for you in the dimension where separation is impossible and love is all." With that, Luminos ascended into the morning sky, becoming first a brilliant star, then a distant point of light, and finally invisible to earthly eyes. But its words remained, burned into Aldrich's heart like brand marks of divine fire. King Aldrich ruled for 17 more years, and his reign became legendary throughout the medieval world. He was known as the wise, the compassionate, and sometimes the king who speaks with angels, though he never claimed such titles for himself. He founded no new religion and wrote no theological treatises. Instead, he simply lived as if love were the fundamental force of the universe, and the effect was transformative. His castle became a place of healing, where the sick found not just medical treatment, but spiritual comfort. His court attracted not just nobles and warriors, but scholars, mystics, and seekers from across Europe, all drawn by stories of a king who had found some profound secret of existence. When Aldrich died in 1364, it was said that his final words were, "The light, I can see the light again." According to those present, he passed with a smile on his face and his arms outstretched, as if embracing someone invisible to mortal eyes. After his death, strange stories began to circulate about the king's transformation. Some claimed he had been visited by an angel, others by a saint or holy hermit. The truth of Luminos was never spoken directly, but it lived on in the changed lives of those who had encountered Aldrich's transformed presence. A few of the king's closest advisors secretly recorded their observations of his final years, noting the profound wisdom and inexplicable insights he demonstrated. These writings were hidden away, passed down through generations of initiates who understood that some truths were too profound for public consumption. One such document, discovered in the ruins of Valdres Castle centuries later, contained these words attributed to King Aldrich. "I once raged at heaven for its silence, not understanding that I was already in constant conversation with the divine through every act of love, every moment of compassion, every choice to help rather than harm. God was never distant. I was simply looking in the wrong direction.
the kingdom of heaven is not above the clouds, but within the heart that has learned to see with eyes of love. Part 8. Conclusion and Call to Action. As we come to the end of this extraordinary legend, you might find yourself asking the same questions that plagued King Aldrich in those pivotal 40 days and nights. Is this merely a beautiful fantasy, or does it point to truths that our rational minds struggle to accept? Can love truly be a creative force in the universe? Is the divine nature something we possess rather than something we must earn?
The questions faced by Aldrich the Faithless are the same questions we face today, perhaps even more urgently in our modern world of scientific materialism and spiritual confusion. We live in an age where traditional religious answers satisfy fewer and fewer seeking souls, yet the hunger for meaning, for connection, for hope beyond the grave remains as powerful as ever. What if the truth is exactly as Luminos revealed to the medieval king? What if the divine spark does indeed burn within every human consciousness, waiting to be acknowledged and expressed? What if the kingdom of heaven is not a distant destination, but a present reality, accessible to anyone willing to shift their perception from fear to love? I'm not asking you to believe this legend as historical fact. That was never its purpose. Like all great myths and parables, its power lies not in its literal truth, but in its capacity to awaken something within us that recognizes deeper patterns of meaning. The story of King Aldrich and his celestial visitor is a mirror in which we might glimpse our own potential for transformation, our own capacity to move beyond the comfortable boundaries of conventional thinking. Perhaps you, like Aldrich, have experienced seasons of doubt, times when the traditional answers felt hollow in the face of real suffering. Perhaps you've wondered if there's more to existence than what we can measure and quantify. Perhaps you've sensed, in moments of profound love or unexpected beauty, that the universe might be far more mysterious and purposeful than our everyday awareness suggests. If these questions resonate with you, if this tale has stirred something in your soul that yearns for a larger understanding of reality, then I invite you to continue this journey with me. Subscribe to this channel because we have many more legends to explore, stories from every culture and era that point toward the same profound truths about human nature and our relationship with the divine mystery that surrounds us. In the comments below, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced moments that seem to transcend ordinary reality? Have you encountered love or beauty or truth that felt too vast to be contained within the boundaries of our physical world? Have you, like King Aldrich, moved through seasons of doubt into something deeper than belief, into knowing? Share your thoughts, your experiences, your questions. This is not just entertainment, it's an exploration of the deepest mysteries of human existence. Every comment, every story shared adds to our collective understanding of what it might mean to be divine sparks temporarily experiencing themselves as separate beings. And if this legend has touched something real within you, if it's offered a new way of understanding your own spiritual journey, then share it with others who might be ready for such questions.
Share it with friends who've grown weary of religious dogma but haven't lost their hunger for transcendence.
Share it with family members who've been hurt by institutional religion but still sense there's something sacred worth seeking. Because ultimately, that's how truth spreads. Not through dogma or doctrine, but through story, through example, through the quiet demonstration of love in action. Just as King Aldrich never preached about his encounter with Luminos, but simply lived as if love were the fundamental force of the universe, we too can embody the truths that call to our deepest selves. The legend of the faithless king and his stellar visitor reminds us that transformation is always possible, that our darkest moments might be preparation for our greatest awakening, and that the love we seek from heaven might already be burning as an inextinguishable flame within our own hearts. Until our next journey into the mysterious borderlands between legend and truth, remember, you are far more magnificent than you have been taught to believe. The divine spark that transformed a bitter king burns just as brightly within you, waiting only for recognition and expression. The stars are calling. The question is, are you ready to answer? Thank you for joining me on this journey into the legendary past. Subscribe, share, and keep wondering. The universe is far stranger and more beautiful than we've been told, and there are countless stories yet to explore together. Remember to hit that notification bell, because next week we'll be diving into another forgotten legend, the tale of a monastery scribe who discovered that angels were living in disguise among the common people, and the shocking revelation they shared about the true nature of prayer itself. Until then, may your journey be filled with wonder, and may you never stop asking the questions that matter most.